10. You lift your moody eyes toward the moon, and watch her sepia half-mask slip askance, and fall through cosmic ether to your face, to which sensuously it adheres. The sphere's dead antique light consumes your visage, and is your only apparel. I guide our little boat to the middle of the black lake, and drop my triple hook into its depths as your wind-swept wig conceals your derriere, and laces the loins from which your phallus hangs. Your mask stops just beneath your nostrils, and thus your cruel smile is evident, as you whistle a song to which we once had waltzed. My triple hook grows weighty with its catch, and I drag the long-buried item from the depths until its heavy fabric floats into my embrace as, clutching it, I pull it onto wood. Excited now, you point your prick toward shore, and I work the oars of our little boat until we are secured next to the landing. Whistling still, you waltz onto dry land and lift your heavy arms onto the moon, and then you bend your arms to me and take the soggy yellow gown from out my hands. I plant my fawn-like hooves into the ground, and allow my hands to nestle round hermaphroditic loins, as you slip into the soggy yellow gown, and call to demon wind to dry your dress. It comes in answer to your summoning, yet it is not alone. I cannot see the flowers at my feet, for smoke and shadow cloud my dull eyes, yet I can feel the soft flesh of a rose, and smell the wilted lily's rank decay. And I can taste the realm from which humanity dreams and weeps, the place to which you lead me in the blithe motion of continued dance. We reach the neglected area of town and enter the dusky theatre. We push through double doors and glide into the crimson auditorium, where rows of ruined pews reek of shredded leather and stale tears beneath the candlelight of chandelier. I peer toward the raised platform that serves as stage, and observes the twisted faces of embalmed clowns, whose marble eyes wink secrets to the rafters where bedraggled birds mutter to themselves. I watch you run and leap onto the stage and stretch your yellow gown with naked hands. I watch you curtsy to the zany stiffs, as if to teach them some new skill by which they could reanimate their limbs, and blow you kisses from their dummy mouths. Your lips, delicately pursed, exhale an airy song, to which the birds above respond. I hear the beating of their tattered wings, and watch their molted feathers drift onto the stage. I see them wing their way to you, and plant their beaks into the fabric of your mask, and smell the streams of blood that slip through the places where your mask is ripped and torn. Your whistling assumes a liquid sound, as bubbles of blood float from your lips toward the zanies that would admire you. And as those bubbles splash onto the charnel mouths, the music you exhale is subtly accompanied with other whispered warbling. A pleasing sound, from reanimated apertures of flesh to which the crazy birds flutter. I watch the dry flesh of the clownish faces fall away in pieces to the floor. Yet still the whistling sounds through grinning jaws, stretched wide on physiognomies of bone. I cannot stand as passive observer any longer, and so I leap onto the platform and frolic on the floor, rolling into mounds of molted down that clings to that which answers for my flesh. And you, majestic master, finally appear, to hover over me with your strange smile, as devil birds crown the air above you, and laugh with beaks that are wet and red. At last you fall onto your knees above my loins, and let your liquid mouth bleed into my womb. 11. We could hear the music, faint as it was, from our porch, and I confess I took a fancy to the sound. Thus I got on my bicycle and pedalled toward the meadow just off the Aylesbury Pike, where the road leads to Kingsport. This meadow has long been a place I like to visit, because of the rugged megaliths that stand there. I like the way the wind sounds as it passes through their upper holes and hollows. You experience rare dreaming when you recline against those megaliths at dusk, and watch the gulf of night deepen over you, like some abyss you might fall into as you step from star to star. It felt sweet to ride beneath those stars that night, nice and easy, no need to hurry, curious as I was concerning the muted music. The sky wasn't its usual black, but rather a deep dark blue bruised with hints of purple, and the wind smelled especially aged as it pushed me on my way. I could just see the hazy silhouettes of the megaliths before me on the spread of meadow where nothing grew except tall dry grass, and although there was no moon that night, the starlight seemed especially bright, and I could easily make out the yellow caravan and dilapidated pickup truck parked some distance from the groupings of pillars. The music had stopped for just a while, but then it started up again, and I knew that it was someone playing an accordion, although no person was in view. My bicycle glided to where the caravan had been parked, and I wondered how its yellow paint could look so bright in such dim light. Here and there someone had painted black stars on the yellow surface. At least I think they were meant to be stars, even though my eyes had trouble focusing on their forms, which seemed to shift and change in a way you wouldn't notice unless you stared at them with steady eyes like mine. Staring at stars was a favourite pastime of my kin. We liked the way their bodies stretched pointed extensions in such a way that suggested living creatures in the sky. These black stars on the yellow caravan had a similar effect, never seeming still, but always expanding and contracting, as if they were breathing. I parked my bicycle and sauntered to the half-open door of the caravan, which looked as if it had once been part of a travelling carnival. The person inside added to this impression, for he was a tall fellow dressed as a clown, with gigantic hands and ears and red rubber nose. Strands of hair escaped from underneath a bowler hat, and I thought it kind of strange the way that hair was identical in every way to the tall dry grass that sprouted in the meadow. The fellow's queerest feature, his eyes, were sunken inside black hollows in his head. You could just see something shining inside those pits, something that gleamed like polished coal. An antique accordion was in his huge hands, its keyboard all shining silver with patterns of embossed design, and the music that he played from it, although rhythmic, had a quality of sadness in its sound, kind of like the music played by a group of Jewish musicians that had given a recital at Miskatonic University when I was a student there. The clown fellow bobbed his head in time to the music, and then he began to stamp one foot so that the entire caravan began to shake. I watched the puppets that were hanging inside large glass jars on a table near him. Puppets with their rainbow-hued strings attached in some weird way to the lids of the jars, so that the funny figures hung in mid-air inside their cells. I wondered at the fabric with which those puppets had been constructed. There was something disturbing in the way the light of the place reflected on their sickly bleached simulation of skin. Maybe that was just the way the light played on and through the texture of the glass with which the large jars had been manufactured. Clownman stopped his noise and lowered his accordion onto his lap, and then he tilted his head and shut his eyes in a manner of listening. I looked away from him and listened as well, to the low haunting sound of the wind whispering through the cavities of the standing stones. This was a sound that I was familiar with, and one that I enjoyed. Indeed, when I was away for all those years, attending college in Arkham, I would sometimes hear this song of wind through ruins in my dreams, like a kind of summons that persuaded my return to Dunwich. I stayed away for 8 years, and obtained the finest education that I could, because it was my plan to leave Dunwich eventually, and try to establish life in some city, as was common for most elder sons of this wasted pocket of the globe, who have tasted life outside the village by attending Miskatonic or Harvard. Once I returned home, however, I knew that I would never leave. I felt too close a kinship to the domed hills and their secret sounds, to the dismal sky, and they who dwelt beyond its dimensions. I relished the occult history of 2 centuries, fantastic legends of sacrifice on Sentinel Hill, and of strange forest presences that laughed mockingly beneath the ground. That forest has a kind of enchanting beauty that I've never seen anywhere else, a beauty that soothes the eyes that behold it as powerfully as it disturbs the mind. So I returned home with a fine education and many books, and I worked my parents' farm and wrote poetry in my quiet hours. I was treated, almost, as a kind of outsider because of my education, because of the way I spoke, because I was able to write and think in a manner that was unusual to the ignorant lot that makes up the village. This backward kind of mockery reached its height when a small collection of my poetry was published by a small outfit in Boston. No wonder that so many of those young men who had earned an education found it necessary to leave the land. I would never do so. The elements of Dunwich flowed within my streams of blood. But I understood too well the desire to flee ignorance and scorn, especially from fools who had never accomplished anything in life. But there were others in Dunwich village who subtly understood my ways, and with whom I exchanged unspoken communication. I felt a similar kind of communion in that meadow, and its quiet carnival caravan, where Clownman and I listened to the song of wind that sighed through the crevices of pillars, and chuckled inside hollows that wind and elemental time had formed. The zany spoke. "I like the way yon wind sounds. You don't get wind like that in the city. Cursed city corrupts everything, including nature. There the wind is just another noise, competing with man-made squeals and bangs and groans. Here the wind sounds as it has for most of time, a wonderful primordial lullaby. Come, lad, let's go outdoors and taste the ageless effluvium." There was a lilt to his voice that sounded foreign, although I couldn't place it. I didn't look at him again because of his lack of eyes, which affected my imagination to the point where I felt that if I peered into those pits too deeply, I would get sucked into their black light. So instead I watched his shadow on the wooden floor next to the discarded accordion, as he stood and stretched and hopped out of the doorway into the dry, tall grass. I listened to his tread, as he slithered through that grass like some cunning serpent, and I heard his hissing into the subtle wind. Not liking the way his puppets in their jars looked at me, with their sad, appealing eyes, I rose calmly and stepped outside to where Clownman was gazing at the midnight sky, and pretending to shoot at a star with finger and thumb poised as pistol. How peculiar that the star, as I watched it, suddenly extinguished. I felt my flesh grow cold as, laughing in a low manner, he stepped near me and pointed his finger to my heart, and wiggled his thumb. "I like your wee village," he whispered, "despite its smell. Actually, that stench is a part of its allure for me. Such an old forgotten trait, like rank prehistoric alchemy." His large nose touched my hair and sniffed. "Aye, I smell it on you too, a hereditary thing, no doubt, that reaches into a place of deep old time and they who pulse within it. I can smell the abyss of another dimension and the daemonic concavities of ancient earth, those places that have captivated your kind, those realms that have caught your imagination and keep you home. How rare such loyalty! Come nigh, let's dance and reawaken dreaming things." He looked so comical, as he raised his large malformed red shoes, and began to tread on the ground to some music in his mind, that I began to laugh and tap my toe to imagine song. Then, winking at me, he produced an ancient-looking pan-pipe, slim and double-columned and bound with black twine, with a length of cord with which one could slip the instrument over one's head and wear it near the heart. Pressing the columns to his mouth, he began to play the tune that I had heard inside my mind, an ancestral tune that I seemed to remember from another era. He played a little while, and then he stopped beside me, and removing the pipe from his lips, offered the instrument to me. One heavy arm caressed my shoulder. "'Tis easily done, laddie. Here, take it in your small white hands. There you go. Listen to this lovely fern that wafts to us from the surrounding hills, and let it teach you how to blow. There you be. Press those pipes to your lips, and call the ones who dream in death. What a scintillating sound! like sparks of noise bursting into ether. There was such persuasion in his voice that I couldn't help but play the role of Daphnis to his Greek god. And then something very odd happened. In my imagination the world around me blurred and altered, and the distant atmosphere all around me became reflective, as if I were encircled by a wall of glass. Clownman's gloved hands, suddenly larger than before, frolicked over me, wiggling their fat fingers in time to my piped song, and my dancing limbs seemed to answer to the movement of his hands, as if I were the creature's animated mannequin. As I danced, the wind among the standing stones became a howling mistral. At least I thought it was the wind that bellowed and pushed hot breath upon my eyes. "Tell me, son of Dunwich, of the secrets you have dreamed. I have journeyed far to ascertain such knowledge." His phrase, the title he bequeathed me, reminded me of my heritage and brought to mind my place. Whatever kind of creature this may have been, it was now in my familiar realm, with which I was intimate. "I can do better than merely tell you," I sang as I capered beneath his gigantic hands. "I can show you." My saying so subdued his alchemy so that his proportions returned to normal size, and whatever of his essence had leached into my mind was gone. I slipped the pipe's cord around my neck, and let the instrument nestle at my breast. Sneering condescendingly, he replied, "You can show me a madness out of time, the pulsing shadow of unearthly dimension. I have sought such things around this paltry globe, ay, and the things that I have peered upon have stolen sanity and sight, but oh, their rich reward!" Finding my feet, I ceased my jolly cavorting and stood quite still. "I can dip you into other realms, into an abyss of old time, the place where secrets mutter underneath the hills of Dunwich. I can give you that, if such you require." He turned his head toward his dilapidated pickup truck, and thought, "I have misplaced my mortal eyes by peering into arcane darkness, and now darkness dwells within these hollow holes that once looked so innocently at the world. My shadows have appetites that I must satisfy. They itch to graze on occult things, to sleep into the places where such revelation may be found. Take me then, young lad, to this environ of mystic revelation. Let me fathom, if I may, its time-worn tale." Easily escaped from his strange spell, I walked beside him to the vehicle and shut my eyes as he followed spoken directions to my abode. My kinfolk had retired, and so no one followed as I led the clown-man into the depths of earth that composed our secret cellar. His malformed feet stalked that sod, as his bulbous nostrils sucked the rancid air until he found the place of buried sorcery that held ancestral secrets of murder and mayhem. Excitedly he leapt upon the circular timber that covered the ancient well, that plank that was still discoloured by my uncle's blood from when he was young and foolish, and moved the covering so as to sniff the tarnished draughts that siphoned sanity and sucked him into suicide. I was but a child at the time of his death, and have no strong recollection of my uncle. But there have been times when, dreaming near the well, I have heard his hungry cry, or whatever it was that spoke to me from the depths. I have heard as well the hacking of his axe with which he had tried to splinter the wooden slab, the slab that still contained deep slits caused by heavy blade. I smiled and laughed out loud as Clownman capered on the covering, as his comical nostrils sensed the beast below. Prancing to him, I indicated that we might, together, remove the cover and thus expose the banished Phaeto of a concealed place. He was strong, the zany at my side, and easily lifted the heavy circular plank and pushed it from us. I had never had the strength or inclination to try and remove the covering on my own, and it beguiled me that the nauseating stench that lifted to us was exactly as I had dreamed it at those times when, disturbed with loneliness, I had come to nap beside the centuried well. "Alas," I whispered, looking down into the well, "there are no rungs on which to climb into the depths. I thought there would be. Too bad. It would have been wonderful to let you down there. to let you listen intimately to the earth noises that have kept Dunwich slumber so uneasy. What revelations that dark place would reward your senses. Oh well. Nay, laddie, was my companion's gleeful reply, I have tricks yet. So saying, he reached into the wide pocket of his ridiculous garb and pulled forth rainbow-hued lengths of rope, and how he could have kept such a lot of it in that pocket defied sane reason. Truly, he was a clever clown. Now then, wee boy, wrap these ropes around my wrists and tie them snug. Good. Now, tangle these others around my ankles. There you go. Hold them securely, sirrah, as I climb into the well and work my way into its aperture. Nay, don't fret. I know a way to make myself as weightless as whispered sin. Here we go. He stood on the brick ridge and waved goodbye with comic exaggeration, and then he jumped into the tainted air. As he drifted downward, his body seemed to shrink in size and lighten in weight, so that he seemed no more than a marionette for me to play with. Down he drifted, out of sight, but I could yet heed his ecstatic voice. God, if you could see what I am seeing with what is left of my ember eyes! It's terrible, monstrous, beyond anything. So this is the secret of decayed and poisoned Dunwich. How can I describe it? Not with mundane language. It's too utterly beyond thought. And yet I ache to name it, so that you too can feast upon its horror. But I think it knows you, for I seem to see your resemblance in the contours of its half-face. Is this the thing that calls to you in vision, the thing that stalks the stars? I have had visions of nameless horror, but I never dreamed of this. Wait, I called down. Let me teach you the ritual dance, so that you can adore it as it so demands. There, see how I pull your strings and move your limbs? What? It has suddenly noticed you, the thing that murmurs and has appetite. You're afraid? What's that? The noises of the earth are like needles in your stretched ears? How jolly! Wait, I'll pull you up a little, so that you dangle in the malignant air, just like your puppets in those jars. Just like your puppets in their jars. What will happen when I return to your caravan and smash those jars with my uncle's axe? It will be a spectacle, I'm sure. Quick, let me reach for the slab, which I pretended was too heavy for me. But look, I move it easily. Here, let me slip these ropes through the crevices in the wood, from which your howls echo just like the wind that whispers through those standing stones. Hang there, in mirthless solitude, and let your companion feast. Bon appétit. So saying, I hurled myself onto the slab of circular wood, and imitated the jester's dance, laughing at his tormented howls. And then I took hold of the pipes that still hung around my neck, brought them to my mouth, and performed a pæan to the horrors of Dunwich.